You're watching Ryan's Big Ideas.
Hey YouTube, Ryan with Ryan's Big Ideas here, and I'd like to go over a few things. First, why buy a used machine in such bad shape? Well, the first reason is because I was trying to save money, and not many machines are available at the time because of forest fires in Colorado.
This summer, Colorado has seen 4 of the 10 biggest wildfires in the state's history.
So that kind of saturated the market, or should I say it made the Bobcat or Skid Steer machines, it made them pretty much unavailable. And any of the machines that were available were all pretty much salvaged machines like mine. And when I went to purchase it, the seller did say that the machine was operational when parked. And I wanted a machine that was mostly all mechanical and had very few electronics. The machine was built in the same year that I was born, and I just wanted a machine for the nostalgia and for the absolute raw mechanical features that it had. And so I took a gamble on this machine, and we were going to see if it was going to pay off. But as time went on, I kind of discovered that the machine needed a whole lot more work than it was probably worth. The machine had a Perkins engine inside of it that was originally equipped, and that engine itself, it came in a pile of boxes and buckets and bolts, and I tried my best to refurbish that engine. I took it all apart. It was missing the oil pan and several of its accessories. When I got the engine, I went ahead and went through it thoroughly, and some of the valves, they were pitted and rusted beyond recognition, and it just wasn't in good shape. So I went on the internet and I went searching for different heads, because the head had been cracked. You can see there that the head had been worked on maybe before by others, and the way that the seller described the machine is that it ran and operated when it was parked. So I basically took the machine from the seller and I attempted to repair the machine to the best of my ability, and what we're dealing with now is a semi-restoration. And the restoration part of it has taken me a lot longer than I could have ever have expected. It's threw me for a loop. I've had to invest lots of time and effort and energy and research. I don't have a background in hydraulics per se, so that whole learning curve kind of took me a bit to be able to figure out the tools of the trade and how to diagnose problems there. But let's go back to that engine. That's a Perkins 4.154 engine, and if you look that up online, you'll basically find out that that engine was also equipped in a lot of different sailboats or yachts of that era, and those yachts, they sell from anywhere from like $65,000 to $125,000 on up. So that being said, those engines were really, really rare, and they had been all picked over by yacht owners that buying an engine from a salvaged Bobcat at what do I want to say, retail prices, or at the current going rate of those engines, they were happy to pay those prices, which were up and over the $5,000 mark. So I went ahead and I looked, and I found that there was also an Isuzu variant of the engine, which is a 4JB1 that came with that same Bobcat, and I could have swapped that over, but the asking prices for that engine were also extremely high. So what I did was I went on eBay and I scoured the web to try to find a comparable engine that had the same amount of horsepower, was roughly the same size, and in working order, and something that wouldn't break the bank. So I ended up sourcing a 2.2 liter Isuzu C240 diesel engine from eBay, and it was out of a military generator, genset, if you will. So I ended up taking that engine and I got it running. But one of the big hurdles with that engine was that it came with an electronic governor on the Zexel fuel pump. So, long story short, I had to source a governor body from China.
I like China.
Because that was the only place that I could source a governor, mechanical governor that would work for my application. So after weeks of research and just trying to contact different Isuzu parts dealers and scouring the web, the only solution that I could come up with was finding this dealer out of China. So there's some good news and there's some bad news, considering I was able to source brand new parts from China. The bad news is that, hey, it comes from China. The quality could be questionable, but the good news is that China is still making this engine to this day, and at least you can still source parts for this engine. It is found in different forklifts and different other machinery of different types, not specifically skid steers, but I did a bunch of research and I found that as long as you turn the fuel pump up, it is capable of anywhere between 40 and about 54 horsepower. So this engine originally was, I think, something like between 54 and 56 horsepower, and it lives at about 3,000 RPM. And I figured that a military genset with low hours on it, that engine was actually made in Japan. I figured that engine would be a perfect donor engine to install into the Bobcat. So, long story short, I took that engine, I put a different governor body onto the Zexel fuel pump, and after fiddling around with the set screws and the fueling, I was able to get that engine to idle, and it would rev up just like any other engine would, and I was able to install it into the Bobcat. So the problem with that is that the engine was about 4 inches longer with the bell housing on it, and I couldn't use that engine with the current flywheel there's a big fan that attaches to the flywheel that goes where that coupling or that U-joint is. And so after fiddling around with it for a while and placing the engine into the back, I figured out that, it's probably easier, instead of adapting that fan flywheel piece, which I had to buy from eBay from another seller, from a salvaged machine. I wasted probably $300 on that part, and it didn't end up working. So I looked up, different solutions as far as like, electric solutions to be able to cool the machine, and I've had mixed, conflicting answers on the forums out there of guys that have already tried to convert the machine's cooling into electrical powered by fans. So what I ended up doing actually is I ended up sourcing some 24 volt fans, and I have 4 of them. Right now I only have 2 on there because it seems to be adequate in the hour or 2 that I've run it. The temperatures and everything seem to be hovering, right where they should be when the machine comes up to speed. So being that they're 24 volt, they require a little less amps, and the battery was still charging. And so I think that's adequate for the machine. But once I got the machine up and running, of course, that is just the beginning of my headaches. So I got the machine up and running, started it up once, and it started puking hydraulic fluid absolutely everywhere. So I chased down a bunch of leaks, and basically what we did was we took the engine and we used just a rudimentary starter, the little trigger starters that you can use, and we started the engine, and we made sure that engine would start up and that the pumps were turning, and I just verified general functionality of the machine. And then I fixed every leak that I could figure out, everything that was leaking. And then once I got a majority of those leaks situated, I, would only run the machine for a few minutes at a time. And then I would shut it down promptly just to make sure we weren't hurting the engine. And then I would need to move on to cooling, and I would need to figure out a way to give me the information and the cab that I needed so that I knew that the engine wasn't overheating. So long story short, I ended up redoing the entire dash assembly. We ended up redoing that, and that took a lot of time. I had to replace and come up with my own solenoids, and I had to basically wire in everything. The machine was missing a gas tank. The machine was missing all sorts of different parts. The harness bar that comes down, it was missing a bunch of small hardware there. The oil cooler, that was completely rotted out. And so basically what I had to do is I had to source one of those, and when I sourced that, I ended up buying some 4JB1 motor mounts to support the back of the C240. So I also bought that fan shroud in hopes that I would be able to adapt the flywheel fan to the current motor, but that never ended up working out. So I've bought lots of different parts that we never ended up using, and that's how we basically got it to this point. And then we had to go through the radiator. I took the radiator to a repair shop. I tried, soldering it all back together. It was in absolute horrendous shape. Really, the machine probably should have went to a salvage yard and probably should have been, ripped apart, and every little piece of it should have been gone through. But instead, me, I couldn't do that, and I got disgruntled, and I kind of gave up on it for a while. So I started this project in 2019, fall of 2019, and then, as everybody knows, shortly a few months after that, the sickness came about. And so that really put a real stop to everything, and I had to focus on, my own personal life and my own career and pulling in money and things like that. So that diverted my attention. So long story short, we got the machine running. I ran it a few times. I had it running for about an hour or two, in the middle of summer in 99-degree heat, and it was performing okay. It was all right, but the machine was so rusted. Like every single lever, every single mechanism that controlled the movement of the machine, maybe not the pedals, but just like the control levers that control the machine's forward and backwards and right and left movement, those levers and those mechanisms and those bearings were completely rusted to the point where you would move the lever and it would just stay exactly where it was. And it took like the force of God moving that machine, back and forth. It took a lot of muscle and effort, and then the sticks, they would just stick. So if you were to move the machine like this, and try to maneuver it, it would just, the levers would stay where they were. And, you know, I would go to hook up the bucket, and I wasn't real comfortable with not having a working emergency brake. And I pulled it into the shop. It was leaking. And then I went through it with a snake camera, and I figured out that the belly of the Cessna pump, one of the piston pumps, it was leaking. And at first I thought maybe it was just a chain case hose, and I was, hoping and praying for the best. And then I ended up figuring out that it was a trunnion cover on the bottom of one of those Cessna Eaton piston pumps, and it had completely fallen out of there. And the C-clip ring that was installed under the, where it holds that little trunnion in, it completely fell out of the machine. And I don't know if that's because I power washed it and, I ended up doing more damage than good. Really, at that point, when I had it working and operational, I probably should have just JB welded that trunnion cover in there and threw it up on Facebook Marketplace and gave it to the next guy, But instead, I got, excited that the machine was running, and I thought that, it wouldn't take too much more to just pull those pumps out there and try to salvage that pump. And so I ended up sourcing a actual pump housing from an agricultural salvage yard in Iowa and or Illinois, somewhere like that, and they ended up sending me that pump housing. And so basically I took all of the guts out of one of those pumps, and I replaced that trunnion cover, and I replaced every seal that I possibly could. And let me tell you, getting all of the pieces and components off where those lever assemblies were, this machine was so rotted, you'd have to be almost insane to continue working on it. So I continued working on it. I pulled every little nut and bolt off of there, sandblasted everything, and that's another story in itself. I had only a 30-gallon air compressor at the time, hardly enough to do any larger sandblasting jobs. So that's where all the work basically came to a halt, and I decided to add a small little lean-to enclosed, an enclosed little building off the side of my shop. And I wanted to do that because I was so sick of the air compressor droning on and on that I decided to basically just make my own little shack for it. And so I don't really have any experience in building, metal buildings or construction like that. So it started off with a 3-yard pad, which was the shortest or the smallest amount that I could get delivered by a truck. So I decided I would build the entire thing based on like about 4 inches to 6 inches of depth in concrete, based on those dimensions. So I sourced a bunch of red iron, and I used 4x4 tubing, or should I say 4x4 square tubing, and then I sourced all the sheet metal that matches the side of the building, and then I sourced a small little roll-up door from China because I couldn't really find anything comparable of that size. So I ended up getting a real good deal on that shipped to me, and it's turned out to be okay. So I ended up installing a 80-gallon Ingersoll Rand air pump, air compressor, and of course I wanted to distribute the air throughout the shop. So I went ahead and came up with a PEX method, and I put an air dryer in between there, or water collector, and then I put little regulators and one dryer at where I was sandblasting, and that took me all of, I think, anywhere from between 6 and 8 weeks. I had work going on and things, and it was the first time I'd ever constructed a metal structure. So, and I did it the right way. I didn't want any kind of leaks in my shop. That would absolutely be a bad deal, especially considering where it is. So I put in a lot of effort and work into that, and making sure that the roof wouldn't leak, and that the seams and everything were, as perfect or as good as they absolutely could be. And I used some spray foam insulation, and I welded that whole structure together and got it all working. And then by that time, then I could continue sandblasting all the little, parts and bits and pieces that I could in order to restore basically the belly of the machine. So, and in that process, I ended up sourcing another e-brake assembly off of eBay, and like everything got, anything that I could put into the electrolysis bucket, I went ahead and did that, and refurbished every part through, either removing material, through grinding, through steel brushes, whatever I could do to kind of resurface the materials. But I wanted to get the machine in an order to where if I had to take something apart again, it wasn't going to be a huge problem. So I got to that point, and then I got a bunch of hardware from Fastenal and Big R, and I sourced Big R is a local farm supply store here, so I found grade 8 hardware for absolutely everything that I could, and I sourced a bunch of other odds and ends, small parts and pieces from Bobcat in order to restore the rest of the machine. So as you can kind of see, the pump looks not brand new, but it's definitely looks, like a good unit now. So long story short, that whole process took me months and months, and I know this is a slow process. Trust me, I would like it to be done as much as anyone else, but the fact of the matter is that, good things take time, and I'm not saying that this is going to turn out, perfect, or, be some kind of immaculate restoration, but it's kind of a retro mod Bobcat, if you will. It's got sort of modern electronics in it. It's got all brand new gauges and, different components and wiring. I went ahead and, made a new wiring loom that goes into the back of the machine. We've got new solenoids. We've got shut-off switches. We've got new fuel filter. I mean, I've spent a lot of time and money and effort. And I would say, all in all, including everything that I've done, I've probably got well over $7,000 into, the machine, the tools, all the specialty tools, and different things that I've needed. I've replaced the front bucket hydraulic cylinder. That was a feat in itself. I basically had to, get that pin out of there. It was all wallered and egg-shaped, and I ended up replacing that entire cylinder assembly. And when I went to go replace it, the only way to get that pin out, because it was bent, was to go ahead and grind off the 2 pieces that held that pin in there. So I had to source 2 new pieces there, weld that back on, and it's just been a long time coming. So I appreciate you sticking with me here, and if you want to, go ahead and like and subscribe, and hopefully we'll be able to continue providing good content on the skid steer. And once we're done with this, hopefully we'll be able to move on to bigger and better projects. But I want this thing to be done and finished just as much as any of you guys. So we're going to work hard towards that goal, and hopefully by spring here, I'll have this thing up and running, and we'll have some videos of it doing work. So once again, I'm Ryan with Ryan's Big Ideas, and if you could go ahead and like and subscribe, I'd greatly appreciate it. Have a good one.